When most people picture the American Civil War, they see paintings, neat rows of soldiers and bright flags fluttering in the wind, commanders charging ahead on horseback like heroes in a novel. But let's be clear, that's just the glossed-over version, the version people like to remember. The truth? It was far more gritty and far more brutal. What really happened on those battlefields was a level of suffering that's hard to put into words, and harder still to forget. This wasn't just a fight between uniforms, it was a relentless meat grinder that chewed up over 620,000 lives. Put that in today's numbers, and you're talking the equivalent of over 6 million dead. How did it get so bad? Well, the weapons were frighteningly modern, rifles that tore through flesh and shattered bone. But the medical care? Stuck in the Dark Ages. That combination turned every battle into a disaster, and every wound into a potential death sentence. Poet Walt Whitman, who volunteered as a nurse, said it best, "The real war will never get in the books." And he wasn't being poetic. He was being honest. Because what the books often skip is the real cost. The groaning of the wounded, the smell of infection, the piles of limbs, the screams from makeshift operating tables. This war didn't just leave scars on the battlefield. It carved them into the souls of a generation. And now, we're going to look past the paintings. We're going to show you what the Civil War really looked like, up close, unfiltered, and unforgettable. By the time the Civil War began, military tactics were already outdated. Generals still ordered their men to form tight lines, shoulder to shoulder, and march straight into oncoming fire. It was the same strategy used for 100 years. But this time, the weapons were way ahead of the tactics. Enter the Minié ball, a small, conical bullet that changed everything. It didn't just pierce, it shattered, it tore through skin, splintered bone, and dragged clothing and dirt deep into the wound. Once it hit you, the damage was often beyond repair. There were no clean wounds, only mangled limbs and shocking injuries. At Gettysburg alone, over 27,000 Minié balls were recovered from a single acre of land. Just imagine that. 1 acre riddled with lead, no cover, no chance. Confederate surgeon Julian John Chisholm didn't sugarcoat it. He wrote, "I have never seen such mangling of human flesh." At Shiloh, the bullets came so fast, soldiers said it sounded like hail on a tin roof. One Union private said the sound of bullets hitting men was like throwing corn at a barn door. That sickening thud became a sound they could never forget. And when a Minié ball struck an arm or leg, bones didn't break, they exploded. Surgeons had one option, amputation, no time, no second chances, just saw it off and moved to the next patient. Anesthesia was rare. Most men were fully awake, held down by their friends, screaming through the pain. This wasn't battle, it was mechanical slaughter, relentless, unstoppable. In the Civil War, you didn't just risk death, you risked surviving, with pieces of you missing, because one single Minié ball could decide everything. Forget everything you know about modern hospitals, because Civil War medicine, it didn't heal, it just tried to keep you from dying too fast. Field hospitals weren't hospitals at all. They were blood-soaked tents, crowded barns, or open patches of dirt. No privacy, no sterility, no silence, just the sound of men in pain. Surgeons worked in assembly line chaos, moving from one mangled body to the next. They didn't have time to clean their tools. Sometimes, they didn't even wipe them off. Speed was the only priority. The faster, the better. Because if they paused, they might lose the next man in line. At Antietam, Union surgeon Jonathan Letterman described his station. The ground was literally covered with men. Their wounds were of the most frightful character. He wasn't exaggerating. At Gettysburg, one surgeon performed 76 amputations in a single day. Think about that. 76 times. The saw went down, and anesthesia? Rare, too rare. Some men got a shot of whiskey. A few were lucky enough to inhale a rag soaked in chloroform, but most were wide awake. They screamed, they begged, and they bled, while their comrades held them down. Mary Chesnut, a Southern diarist, wrote after visiting a hospital in Richmond. The surgeons are sawing off arms and legs as fast as they can. The screams of the wounded under the knife are heartbreaking. But even after the cutting was done, survival wasn't guaranteed. Wounds became infected. Flies swarmed over open flesh. Dirt clung to bandages. There were no antibiotics, no antiseptics, not even a proper understanding of germs. And so many died, not from bullets, but from bacteria. Some soldiers would have done anything to avoid that table. Some even carried fatal pills to make sure they never woke up under a surgeon's saw. Because in the Civil War, the lucky ones were those who never made it to the hospital at all. The Civil War didn't just destroy men, it destroyed everything around them. It scorched the land, tainted the water, and poisoned the very air they breathed. Out in the trenches, soldiers didn't worry about strategy. They worried about their next meal, and most of the time there wasn't one. The standard ration was hardtack, a dry, rock-hard cracker that often came crawling with maggots. Some men joked that the bugs were extra protein. Others held worm races just to pass the time. Dark humor in a place with very little to laugh about. Salt pork was the other staple, except it usually arrived rancid, green or black, too rotten to eat, but oily enough to burn as firewood. In Vicksburg, Confederate soldiers were so desperate they ate rats, dogs, and even shoe leather. One man paid $1 a pound for mule meat. Another boiled his belt and called it soup. But it wasn't just the food, it was the filth. Bodies, both human and animal, were left to rot in the sun. At Gettysburg, over 7,000 dead horses contaminated the soil and water. Locals said the stench was so strong, it could wake you in the middle of the night. Farmers couldn't grow crops the next spring. The ground was too poisoned, the air too thick with decay and disease. It swept through camps like wildfire, typhoid, dysentery, smallpox. Without clean water or sanitation, latrines overflowed, streams ran brown, and one wrong sip could kill you. Private William Christie described it this way: first comes the fever, then the flux, then, if you're still breathing, pneumonia finishes the job. Some soldiers stopped hoping for victory. They just hoped to survive the week. One Confederate general said it plainly: death by glory was better than death by sickness. Because in this war, it wasn't just bullets that tore you apart. It was the hunger, the filth, the silence. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a world that had forgotten how to care for the living. Some men died in battle. Others died in places far worse. Welcome to Andersonville, the most notorious prison camp of the Civil War, officially named Camp Sumter. But to those who lived and died there, it was simply hell. Built to hold 10,000 prisoners, Andersonville soon held over 32,000. There were no buildings, no beds, no shelter from the rain, the heat, or the cold. Just bare ground, open sky, and a wall of logs. Inside that wall, a river ran through it. Not for drinking, but for everything: bathing, cooking, and defecating. The water turned black, and those who drank it, many didn't last the week. Each morning the living stepped over the newly dead. Their bodies left where they fell. There were too many to bury, too little strength to care. Disease ruled the camp: dysentery, scurvy, gangrene, and the worst of all, despair. There was a deadline, a wooden rail about 20 feet from the wall. If a prisoner touched it, guards had orders to shoot on sight. And they did. Some crossed it on purpose, not to escape, but to end it. One guard bragged he shot 31 Yankees in a single month. To him, it was sport. To the prisoners? Another reminder. You were not meant to survive. Inside the camp, things got even darker. With food scarce and strength fading, prisoners turned on each other. A gang called the Raiders robbed, beat, even killed their fellow inmates for scraps. Eventually, the camp's own prisoners formed a justice group called the Regulators. They captured the Raiders, held trials, and on July 11th, 1864, 6 men were hanged, not by guards, by their fellow prisoners, because even in hell, some still tried to draw a line between right and wrong. Andersonville didn't just break bodies, it shattered spirits. It was a place where hope went to die, and men followed. Some men didn't die in battle, they died running. In the shadows of the Civil War, not all battles were fought with rifles. Some were fought alone, in silence, against dogs, cold, and time itself. We're talking about the fugitives, those who ran, not from duty, but from something even worse. Runaway slaves, military deserters. They shared one thing in common. They were hunted. Slave catchers were paid in cash and blood. They used trained hounds, traps, and even torture to track people down. Some had networks of informants stretching across states. No hiding place felt safe. No movement went unnoticed. Many of the enslaved ran with bare feet, bleeding across rocky ground. Some didn't eat for days. One survivor wrote, "We ate bark from trees and hoped to wake up tomorrow." But they weren't the only ones fleeing. Deserters, soldiers who couldn't take it anymore, became targets too. To the army, they were cowards. To their families, they were ghosts. Hunted by patrols, betrayed by neighbors, and punished without mercy. In some towns, deserters were executed in public, a warning to others. Their former comrades were forced to watch, the silence after the gunshots. That was the real punishment. Some deserters didn't get caught, but they paid another price. They lived the rest of their lives in shame, hiding their names, their faces, their stories. Others were captured and tied to posts for days in the cold. Some were forced to run the gauntlet, beaten by fellow soldiers as they stumbled past. Some died before they reached the end. But the worst part was knowing you'd never be free again, even if you escaped. Because once you were hunted, when you carried that fear with you, every sound became a threat, every step a possible ending. One man said, "I survived the war, but I never stopped running." And maybe that's the cruelest truth of all. In the Civil War, even escaping could kill you. The Civil War ended on the battlefield, but for those who lived through it, the war never really stopped. It followed them home, in silence, in memories, in wounds that didn't heal. The cannons were quiet, but the screams stayed. Soldiers came back with empty sleeves, hollow eyes, and hearts too heavy to speak. They survived, but not unchanged. Some lost limbs, others lost families. Many lost themselves. Homes were rebuilt, towns recovered, but for a generation of Americans, something was gone forever. Because this war didn't just take lives, it took innocence. It changed the meaning of pain, of courage, of survival. One veteran said, "We were touched with fire, and we never stopped burning." Maybe that's the cruel truth of war. It ends with a signature, but it never really leaves. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories from history. We'll see you in the next video.